After World War II, the world was innovating quickly. The United States was going to the moon, and machines were being used in everyday life. The world of racing did not skip on these innovations. Battles at Le Mans and Formula Ones would start, and they kept engineers on their toes, now needing to find better ways to dominate the track. These legendary battles created even more legendary cars, like the GT40, 300 P3, and SL300 SLR. Many consider this the first golden era of motorsport. And in this climate, the small car brand from Stuttgart would join the fight and try to make a mark. With one car, this brand would be built and transformed into a brand built on winning and breaking records. This is the story of how Porsche became giants of motor racing. In the late 60s, Porsche was nothing special. They were just a small manufacturer that had a limited budget to do anything. Along with confusing management, two families at the time were fighting over the brand. But one 26-year-old would be able to pull through this as the leader. His name is Ferdinand Piëch. He was the grandson of Ferdinand Porsche, the founder of Porsche. Along with, he would have a very successful career. In the future, working on the Audi Quattro and becoming the head of the Volkswagen Group. But when he was 26, he was just starting to get control of Porsche. And he only had one thing on his mind. He wanted to win the 24 Hours of Le Mans. This, at the time, was the most prestigious race, and probably still is. In 1967, there would be a slight change in the rule. The engine capacity was limited at 3 liters, but you could get 5 liters if you created 50 examples. The rule changed so you only would need 25 examples to make the 5-liter engine. Ferdinand realized that since the homologation rules were less, he realized that the 3-liter 908 Porsche that was already made could be improved greatly, giving them a chance to win at Le Mans. In the later half of 1968, it was all hands on decks with Porsche. Legend has it that the accountants and lawyers were even working on the 917. Porsche needed to do this because they only had 9 months to create an almost brand new race car, and then 25 examples of that car. This feat is nearly impossible, but incredibly, the team was able to create the 25 cars by the deadline. That is, if you think they didn't cheat. Some people argue that since half their cars were on truck axles, they shouldn't be counted. But that argument should be thrown out because the lineup of 917s passed the test by the FIA. After long, hard months used to develop the test car, Porsche was finally able to show off their new car. But how did the Porsche team know that the 917 would be so good? Well, the engineers took a very bold risk, creating the lightest, most powerful car at the time. They used the chassis similar to the 908s, but instead of heavy aluminum, they used steel. The chassis was made by hand. This was the 60s after all, but the measurements and fabrications still had to be exact. To make sure, they put pressurized gas in the pipes. If the pressure stayed the same, then it was good, but if the pressure went down, the chassis would have to be checked for any cracks. An air-cooled engine called the 917-910 was similar to the 908s, but it had an entirely new bottom end, and instead of the boxer arrangement, the 917 used a flat 12 crankshaft, which allowed the opposite connection rods to share the crankshaft bearings. These changes made the car engine more compact. With this engine, it displaced a little under 4.5 liters, but it was still powerful, and the initial rating was about 580 brake horsepower. Even though on paper the 917 should have been the fastest car on track, when it was first shown, the car was not dominating. There is no doubt that the car was fast, driving the Mulsanne straight at 300 kilometers, and running the fastest times on the tracks. But the drivers still preferred the older 908s, because of its stability, and the back end wobbles, losing some control. One of the drivers said that he was relieved when the car finally broke down because he was so scared for his life. And at Le Mans, something would happen that would make the drivers even more hesitant to race the 917. In just the first lap of the race, John Woelfel suffered a fatal crash. It was attributed to his seatbelt and lack of experience behind the wheel. But there was a small positive that might make up for his death. The two other Porsches led the race for almost 300 laps, till both of them suffer clutch bell housing problems. Before the time when engineers could just run in-depth diagnostics and simulations on computers, it was very hard to see the problem in race cars. And this is no different from the 917. Finding the problem was very difficult, and it was a must for Porsche. Porsche was already so far into the development, and with all of the costs, if Porsche didn't succeed, it was very likely that they'd go bankrupt. To help get more budget, Porsche partnered with Gulf Racing. This helped with their money problem, but not their race car problem. Now, with the help of Gulf, they were able to approach the issues with the car. It was very hard to pinpoint what the issue was, and why it was not keeping grip. But after hours of testing in Austria, they would eventually find a solution. And the way that they found the problems was bugs. This might seem very random, but many cars like the 917 would be covered in bugs after a race. This is when a keen engineer had a eureka moment. They would fix the issue. You see, at the end of the race, there would be no bugs on the rear of the Porsche. This meant that the issue was with the aerodynamics. They came up with a solution to hack off the rear and replace it with new aluminum section. This greatly improves stability, and they gave this a nickname, Kurz, or the German word for short. In 1970, the next season, the 917 would have to face Ferrari's new Le Mans racer, the 512S. The 512S was less powerful and heavier compared to the 917. Even at the beginning of the race, it looked like Porsche was destined to win. Many saying that Porsche had already won in the first 12 hours of the race. And with heavy rain for most of the second half, the Porsche was not able to be stopped by its competition, and they filled the podium with two 917s and a 908. The next year, Porsche changed the design of the 917 again. The biggest difference was the fins on the back of the car. These fins further helped stabilize the car and helped the car handle better. With this improvement, it was no surprise that the Porsche 917K with the Martini team would end up winning the 24 Hours of Le Mans. In 1971, we were able to see for the first time Porsche with the famous Pink Piggy livery. The bodywork of the 917-20 was developed by a French company called Sierra, which produced a car body that was larger in radius and had bigger curves than the normal 917. It was kind of a joke. Someone remarked that it kind of looked like a pig. So Lepine painted the car pink and added butcher's outline of sorts and highlighted various cuts on a pig. Now this livery is now famous, being seen on the 911, Taycan, and so many more cars. And with it wins in 1970 and 1971, this would start the dominance and worldwide recognition of Porsche. It had to step back for a second though, because the FIA banned its 5-liter 12-cylinder engine. But that didn't matter. Porsche already made its impact, and it brought lots of attention to itself. And this started a never-ending reign in racing that has seen them win over 30,000 racing, becoming the most successful team at Le Mans, winning 19 different times, along with creating some of the best road cars the world has ever seen. The Porsche 917 transformed Porsche from a small car brand in Germany to racing giants that is now one of the most recognizable sports car brands in the world.